To what extent can a sanction ruin a race and expose a crisis within the Formula One regulations? Today I'll tell you why Hamilton's penalty in Mexico has ignited a war between Ferrari and the FIA, with Vasseur directly attacking the stewards, and how this could change the rules of the game forever. The 2025 Mexican Grand Prix, held at the traditional Autodromo Hermanos Rodriguez, promised to be one of the most exciting weekends on the calendar. An iconic circuit, full of history and with one of the most electrifying atmospheres of the entire season. But what no one anticipated was that this race would become the epicenter of one of the most heated controversies in modern Formula One. Not because of a fight for the championship, nor because of a surprise victory, but because of a sanction that completely changed the course of the competition and unleashed an open war between Ferrari and the FIA. From the start, there was an unusual tension. Lewis Hamilton started from third position with his Ferrari SF25, in one of his best weekends since joining the Scuderia. In front of him, the McLaren Verstappen duo pressed from the first meter. It was on lap 6 where chaos broke loose. Max Verstappen, as usual, did not hold anything back. Under braking for turn 1, he launched his Red Bull into the track with characteristic aggressiveness, seeking to overtake Hamilton in an extremely narrow spot on the circuit. The contact was inevitable. The wheels rubbed, the Ferrari was pushed off the track, and Verstappen also ended up cutting through the grass in the following corners. But that was just the beginning of a chaotic sequence. When both cars appeared to be rearranging themselves, Hamilton immediately attempted to regain his position. On arrival at turn 4, he braked late with all the risk that entails, and found himself side by side with the Red Bull again. However, by locking the brakes, he failed to take the corner correctly and went straight into the escape zone, cutting across the grass and rejoining ahead of not only Verstappen, but also the young Ollie Bearman, who was paying attention to the chaos. The stewards considered that Hamilton had gained an undue advantage and did not give up the position. The decision was devastating, a 10-second penalty, which would destroy his chances of a podium finish. This is where the controversy really turns into a scandal. Because while Hamilton was receiving that harsh penalty, several drivers, including such notable names as Charles Leclerc, Carlos Sainz, Antonelli and Liam Lawson, had also cut the route in the first corners, and were not penalized. All of them took advantage of the confusion of the first laps to avoid the traffic outside the circuit, gaining positions or maintaining them. That asymmetry in the commissioner's judgment was what really lit the fuse. The context cannot be ignored. The penalty was applied under official document number 36, issued by the stewards on October 26, 2025. And although on paper Hamilton's infraction fit with the rule that penalizes obtaining a durable advantage by cutting the track, the problem lies in how that rule was applied with selective harshness in his case and not in that of the other drivers involved in similar situations. The most shocking thing is that all this happened when Hamilton was in top form. Ferrari had worked for weeks to fine-tune its performance, and the Briton finally seemed to have found rhythm with the SF25. After a difficult debut in Australia, his race in Mexico was a clear opportunity to achieve his first great result with the team. And he was doing it. Until the penalty changed the course of his day, relegating him from third position to 8th place, dragged by traffic and a punishment that, according to many, was disproportionate. Vasseur's indignation arose not only from the penalty itself, but from the context in which it had been applied. In his words, the sanction imposed on Hamilton was very, very severe and responded to a limited and biased interpretation of the facts. It was not simply a punishment for cutting the lane. It was a penalty that made no sense if you looked at the race as a whole. Vasseur not only said it, he argued it with surgical precision. 10 seconds for an action in turn 4, while Verstappen had cut across the grass 100 meters before without any consequences. How do you explain that? His criticism was direct, technical, and deeply founded. He did not appeal solely to the emotion or frustration of the moment. He talked about precedents, sports management, and strategic context. He mentioned how other drivers had committed similar actions without any punishment and how this reflected a worrying pattern of lack of consistency in decision-making by stewards. But the most powerful criticism was not the comparison with other incidents. It was his observation about the real and devastating effect the penalty had on Hamilton's career. Vasseur explained that if the penalty had been 5 seconds, a common penalty, and that it has even been applied in more serious circumstances, Hamilton could still have maintained 4th position. But with 10 seconds left, the Brit fell outside the leading group and got stuck in traffic. On a circuit like Mexico, where overtaking is extremely difficult due to the lack of effective zones outside the long DRS stretch, this amounted to a conviction without appeal. What was most interesting was how Vasseur approached the technical component of the track. He pointed out that the unique characteristics of the Mexican circuit, altitude, compromised aerodynamics, low grip in certain areas and pressure on the brakes, require more nuanced management of sanctions. He did not ask for privileges for Ferrari. What he called for was contextual understanding. The Frenchman did not demand that mistakes be forgiven, but rather that they be understood in their proper dimension. One of the most powerful phrases in his speech made clear the level of frustration the team felt. "We are in Mexico. I'm not saying that the penalty should be adapted to the circuit, but you have to understand what is being done." That line contained all the criticism. A sanction without analysis of the environment is not justice. It is automation. And in a highly complex sport like Formula One, automatism is an enemy of equity. He also denounced that the penalty was applied without considering the chaos that occurred in the first rounds. Several cars had crossed the track limits, some even taking a direct advantage, and no action was taken against them. Vasseur not only saw it as an affront to his driver, but as a symptom of a deeper problem: the lack of unified criteria in race decisions. Furthermore, his reaction was amplified by the context in which it occurred. Ferrari is going through a sporting reconstruction process. They have once again been contenders, but every point counts in a fight for second place in the championship that is expected to be very close against Mercedes and Red Bull. A referee error does not only affect a driver. It affects the entire narrative of the championship, the internal morale of the team, and the public perception of the sport. Vasseur concluded his public appearance with a message that was interpreted as a warning. He suggested that if the FIA does not review its action protocols and establish a clear line for decision-making, the integrity of the championship could be compromised. Hamilton's subsequent statements, once the race was over, were equally harsh but loaded with technical arguments. He explained in detail what he experienced inside the car: the dust raised in the escape, the lack of grip, the pressure of the dirty air coming from Verstappen's Red Bull. According to him, the asphalt conditions in that area were like driving on ice. He also noted that he had tried to partially return the position, but seeing that Verstappen remained off the track and that Behrman was approaching, he decided to rejoin to avoid further chaos. In his interpretation, it was a logical tactical decision, not a trap. Ferrari fully supported its driver's position. Vasseur and the technical team presented telemetry evidence and route maps that showed that Hamilton reduced speed after returning to the asphalt, which would rule out a real-time gain. However, the FIA dismissed that defense, arguing that reinstatement allowed it to maintain its position and therefore benefit from the action. The commissioner's insistence on maintaining the sanction not only deepened the tension, but also left an institutional wound open. Within the FIA, the situation was not easy either. Subsequent leaks indicated that the commissioner's panel was divided. Some members would have considered a reprimand or a 5-second penalty sufficient, but the tougher stance prevailed, driven according to insiders by a desire to maintain authority following multiple track limits incidents in the opening laps. This phrase, revealed by accredited journalists, further inflamed the indignation of Ferrari's entourage. Authority or justice? That became the question that dominated the post-Grand Prix debates. The British, for his part, used his influence to continue the debate. At the press conference after the event, he seemed calm, but his words were sharp. "I have been in this sport for more than 20 years. I have seen many debatable decisions, but this one does not make sense. I do not understand what we are trying to teach. If each maneuver is judged without context, then what we are doing is not racing. It is following a manual to the letter without looking at what really happens on the track." Ferrari, for its part, has begun to push for a deeper review of the FIA's internal processes. Frédéric Vasseur hinted at it when he spoke not only about Hamilton's sanction, but also about a lack of global vision in the management of the Grand Prix. What he raised was the need for decisions not to be made only based on the literal regulations, but rather considering the technical, strategic, and competitive context of each incident. F1 is a sport with an extraordinary level of complexity, and applying sanctions without understanding the full picture is a recipe for injustice. The controversy that erupted at the 2025 Mexican Grand Prix with the penalty on Lewis Hamilton cannot be reduced to a simple error of interpretation or a debatable sanction. What is at stake is much deeper: the competitive integrity of Formula One, the legitimacy of its regulatory structure, and above all, the confidence of the protagonists in the system that must guarantee fair play. Let me know in the comments what you think about all this.